It was winter, just past dawn over the southern hills of Savannah, Georgia. A pale sun pushed timidly through the heavy morning mist, casting a dull silver sheen over the abandoned fields. The air was thick, humid, carrying the scent of red clay still damp from the night's rain. On a dirt road winding past deserted farmlands, a lone figure staggered forward. Barefoot, her skirt torn above the knees, her dark hair tangled and clinging to the nape of her neck, Anna Moore never once lifted her gaze. Each step was an extension of the night before. A silent escape, directionless, hopeless. She had been thrown out of the small dress shop where she'd worked for nearly a year, cast out with no chance to explain, after being accused of stealing a silver locket belonging to the shop owner. No one asked, no one listened, just one sentence, one cold glance, and the door slammed shut behind her. From that moment on, Anna had nowhere to go. The sky was still dim when her knees buckled by the roadside. Her feet were bleeding, her fingers stiff with cold. She carried nothing, no money, no food, only a faded ribbon tied around her wrist, pale blue, the last gift from the only woman who had once called her little one. Somewhere in the distance, wheels began to turn, and fate, as always, had a path in mind, one she could never have predicted. The black Cadillac rolled slowly over the pothole-ridden road, its tires sinking into the mud with a low, steady groan. In the back seat, William Ashford leaned his head against the window, eyes fixed on the empty stretch ahead, though his mind was far removed from the landscape. Heir to an immense Southern fortune, William had once been a name that lit up the society columns of Savannah. But since the sudden death of his wife, he had withdrawn. No more soirees, no auctions, no polite gatherings. Ashford Hill had become less of a mansion and more of a retreat. He now lived among books, silent fields, and cold mornings like this one. The car suddenly jerked to a halt. The driver leaned out of the window, frowning at something on the roadside. William leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he spotted a frail body slumped in the grass. Without waiting for instruction, he opened the door and stepped out, his polished shoes sinking into the wet earth. He approached with steady, unhurried steps. When he reached her, he knelt down. The girl didn't stir, save for the shallow rise and fall of her breath. Mud coated her arms and legs. Dried blood streaked across her forehead. Her dress was torn, her body trembling, but what gave him pause was her hand, curled tightly around her wrist, clutching a faded blue ribbon as if it were the last thing tethering her to this world. William asked no name, he asked no question, he merely turned toward the driver and spoke in a calm, resolute tone. Take her to Ashford Hill. And from that moment on, their fates would no longer run on separate tracks. The room where Anna awoke had high ceilings, ivory walls, and arched windows that opened onto a misty garden. Morning light filtered through sheer white curtains, slipping softly across milk-colored sheets. Everything was so clean, so untouched, it made her hesitate to set her bare feet down on the thick carpet. She couldn't remember much about being brought here, only the weight in her limbs and the fog in her mind, as if time inside this house moved differently from the world outside. An older woman with a stern face and clipped tone brought her a bowl of warm soup and a set of clean clothes. There was no greeting, no questioning, only a single message passed along. Mr. Ashford requests that you remain here until you are fully recovered. Anna wasn't sure how she was meant to interpret that. In the following days, she moved quietly down polished wooden corridors, careful not to draw attention. Yet no matter how silently she stepped, she often felt seen, not by the staff, but by William Ashford, always from a distance, through glass panes, across stairwells. He didn't avoid her gaze, but neither did he seek her out. His eyes, calm, discreet, quietly observant, held no judgment, only a kind of noticing that unsettled and soothed her all at once. Their first conversation happened in the conservatory, where Anna often went in the mornings. She was mending the hem of an old skirt, her fingers moving with practiced ease. William entered unannounced, a worn book in hand. "It's rare to see hand stitching that precise," he said softly. She looked up, nodded, hesitated, then replied, almost a whisper, "I learned from watching. Dresses, in shop windows. No one ever taught me." He handed her the book, a collection of Whitman poems, and took the seat beside her. They talked about thread and tension, about poetry, about how she once copied letters off butcher shop signs on her way home from work. No personal questions, no pity, just silence filled with something softer than air, and maybe, for the first time, neither of them felt quite so alone. That night, the full moon hung silently over the old tiled roof of Ashford Hill, its silver light stretching across the stone path leading to the back garden. The house had already drifted into sleep. Only the soft hum of insects and a whispering breeze through bare winter trees remained. Anna sat alone on a wooden bench near the rose trellis, now stripped of leaves, the moonlight reflected in her eyes, making her look both clear and lost. Her fingers traced the edge of a small fabric square, but no stitches had formed. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Footsteps sounded behind her, soft against the stone. William. He wore no coat, only a thin gray sweater. The moon cast shadows across his tired face, but his eyes were gentle, unguarded. "Do you often come out here at night?" he asked, quietly. She didn't answer right away. She looked at him for a moment, then spoke directly. Why did you bring me here, that night? You didn't even know who I was." William held her gaze, as if weighing which words would wound her the least, but then he simply sighed. "Because when I saw you, I felt something familiar, like I'd known you before, even if I couldn't say how or when." Anna didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She began to speak. About years spent living in the back of a tailor shop, how she taught herself to read from old store signs, how she stitched scraps of fabric into small pouches and traded them for secondhand books. William listened without interrupting. Then he spoke of his mother, a woman who spent her youth embroidering handkerchiefs to escape the coldness of her marriage, of the last time he saw her cry, and how she never explained why. They didn't speak of loneliness, but it was there, unmistakable, in the quiet narrowing of space between them. Just as they were about to rise, a single snowflake fell, soft and unexpected, landing in Anna's hair. William reached up and gently brushed it away. In that moment, their eyes met. No words were spoken, but something shifted, quietly, irrevocably. That morning, the sound of an unfamiliar engine echoed down the tree-lined drive of Ashford Hill. Anna, seated by the window with a piece of unfinished embroidery in her lap, looked up just as a cream-colored Packard came to a stop at the main steps. The car door opened with theatrical precision. First came a cream heel, then a sweep of silk, and finally a woman whose beauty had been shaped by grand dinners, foreign schools, and long summers in Charleston. Evelyn Montgomery is William's former fiancée. Evelyn didn't need to speak to restore order. A single glance across the foyer straightened the posture of the staff. A fleeting smile down the hallway changed the weight of the silence. And then she saw Anna. No words passed between them, just a look, long, quiet, assessing. Evelyn didn't ask who she was. She didn't have to. Those who had once belonged to places like this always recognized the shift of something that was meant to be theirs. The next morning, Anna was summoned. No accusations, no explanation. A maid guided her to the back wing, the servants' quarters, a small room, low ceiling, dim light, a place where one's presence left no echo. Anna didn't argue, she only nodded. And in the quiet, she understood that the space she had just been removed from had never truly been hers. That evening, the skies over Savannah rolled into a heavy strip of pewter gray. The air thickened, holding its breath before the coming storm. The willow trees bowed low in the wind, their slender arms shivering with the first hints of rain. Ashford Hill glowed with warm light, laughter spilling from the dining hall, where guests raised crystal glasses and exchanged polished pleasantries. Anna was not among them. She hadn't expected to be. Clad in a plain gray dress, she slipped quietly out from the servants' wing and made her way toward the conservatory, a refuge she often sought when she wished to be unseen. No one noticed. No one asked. She passed through the marble halls and shadowed gardens like a ghost. The glass door to the conservatory was ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp soil and early camellias. Anna sat in a weathered wooden chair by the window. Rain began, soft at first, then pounding, urgent. Each drop struck the glass above like restless fingers tapping for entry. Cold crept into her sleeves. She stood to leave, only to find the door had been latched. Perhaps a maid had checked the room and locked it, unaware of her presence. She knocked twice. No reply. The storm swallowed the sound. She did not panic, did not cry. She sat again, arms wrapped around herself, eyes closed. The cold sank deeper, but she did not move. A part of her had already learned what it meant to be left behind. Then, footsteps, muffled but sure, cut through the storm. The door burst open. William Ashford appeared, his shoulders soaked, breath quick, eyes wide. He said nothing. He looked at her for a long moment, then removed his coat and walked toward her, gently laying it across her shoulders. His fingers brushed hers. A touch that should have been nothing, but wasn't. She looked up. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. In the sound of rain, the glow of hallway light, and the steady beat of something unnamed inside their chests, something sparked, fragile, but real. Across the hall, Evelyn Montgomery stood still. She had seen it all, and in that gaze, another storm began, not from the sky, but from within. The days after the storm brought no peace. Though the skies had cleared, something still pressed quietly against every wall of the Ashford estate. No one spoke of what had happened in the garden, but that silence only made everything more obvious. Evelyn Montgomery never mentioned the scene she had witnessed. There were no accusations, no insinuations. Instead, she changed her approach. She frequented the library more often. She made her presence felt, as if determined to leave her trace in every corner of the house. In every conversation with William, she subtly brought up the topic of marriage, the suitable dates for an announcement, the political advantages of an alliance with the Ashford family, the guest list that needed arranging, and even the wedding gown her mother once wore. She gave no orders, she merely suggested, but each suggestion carried the weight of a declaration. William sat listening, his hand resting on the arm of the chair beside the fireplace. His face betrayed no resistance, but no agreement either. His responses were always brief, polite, and gradually grew more distant. Each time Evelyn mentioned us, William's mind drifted beyond his control to the image of Anna Moore sitting in the greenhouse, her hands tangled in thread, her eyes lowered, her expression so intent it stole the breath from his lungs. Evelyn noticed that distance. Like a draft slipping through a crack in the door, she felt it clearly. Though unspoken, it made her posture stiffen. Her smile turned rigid. Her words grew sharp. Rumors, like dust in sunlight, always find their way into the quietest of places. And that morning, when a dark brown carriage rolled to a stop before Ashford Hill's gates, Anna felt the calm she'd only just begun to build slip quietly away. The woman who stepped out was Mrs. Mildred Langford, the dress shop owner who had once dismissed Anna without a word of defense. She entered the house with the poise of someone bearing truth and a heart thick with judgment. William received her in the parlor. Their conversation was held behind closed doors, but when he emerged, Anna saw it, the shuttered expression, the way his eyes no longer lingered on her like before. That evening, William did not dine at home, and in the days that followed, the silence between them thickened into something colder. He remained courteous, distant, always polite, but something had fractured. And Anna knew. He had heard something she had no chance to refute. One night, she overheard the maids whispering. Mrs. Langford said the girl once stole a locket. Thrown out in the dark. No family, no defense. Anna stood frozen. The past she had buried was now being whispered through the very halls that once felt like shelter. And William, the man whose silence once held understanding, now wielded it as doubt. There was nothing left to anchor her. Before the first light of morning, Anna left Ashford Hill. No letter, no farewell. She took only a handkerchief, an old notebook, and the faded blue ribbon tied carefully around her wrist. She left quietly, just as she had arrived. In the days that followed, William found the house unbearably large. He spent hours at the window, watching the dirt road stretch into nothing, waiting for something that wouldn't return. And the name Anna, when it rose in his memory, cut like glass. He had let her go without asking, without trusting, without holding on, until he decided to search. The truth, as it often does, revealed itself with ruthless clarity. The locket had been stolen by Mrs. Langford's nephew, a young gambler who had used Anna's absence to cover his debts. The locket had surfaced in a night market and William retrieved it, not for its worth, but for her name. That very afternoon, he visited Evelyn Montgomery. The conversation was brief. No shouting, no pleading, only closure. William said simply, "I can't marry someone when my heart belongs elsewhere." And his heart, now, had only room for one, the girl who once walked away in the rain without looking back. That morning, dew still clung to the porch rail when a modest carriage pulled up to the farmhouse gate. Anna was wringing a towel when she saw a woman step down. Upright, silver-haired, with a gaze both kind and unwavering. "I'm Mrs. Whitmore, an old friend of William Ashford's mother," she said plainly. "I've brought you a letter, and a choice." From her coat, she pulled a cream-colored envelope, sealed neatly with red wax, and placed it on the wooden kitchen table. Anna reached for it with 2 fingers, as though the paper might alter everything it touched. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakable, confident but slightly unsteady. "Anna, I should have believed you from the start, not because of the locket, but because of the look in your eyes when you left. I should have known then. If you're willing to return, this house won't be a place to stay. It will be home. If you still want it to be. I'm sorry for the silence." When she finished reading, she sat still for a long time, fingers curled around the letter's edge, as if afraid it might vanish if she let go. That afternoon, she packed. Not much, just a few clothes, an unfinished embroidery, a folded scarf, and the letter, carefully tucked inside her coat near her heart. When the carriage rolled back through Ashford Hill's gates, there was no fanfare, but a maid led her to a new room. One with a window that looked out onto the garden, a chair beside an embroidery frame, and a silence softer than any greeting. Hours later, William knocked on her door. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because in his eyes, for the first time, there was no guarded distance. Only hope. Not long after Anna returned to Ashford Hill, on an afternoon where sunlight slanted through the window and the lavender bushes swayed in the breeze, William stepped into the embroidery room, holding nothing but a small box in the palm of his hand. He didn't kneel. He simply stood before her, serious in a way that made it clear what he was about to say was the most important thing of his life. "I've made mistakes. Too many silences. Too many times I looked away when I should have spoken. But if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my days proving that love doesn't need to begin perfectly. It just needs to be chosen again, every day." She nodded. No words needed. They held a small wedding, just a few close friends, in the garden, where wildflowers bloomed, untamed and radiant. Anna wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself. William watched her without blinking, as if even a glance away might make the moment vanish. Life afterward was quiet but full. Anna opened a sewing class for children in the nearby countryside, teaching them how to sit tall and stitch with heart. William was no longer the silent man behind the window. He became a gentle husband, one who smiled, one who knelt to untangle thread in her lap without asking why. 3 years passed. One autumn afternoon, Anna walked through the garden with her daughter in her arms, soft brown curls, eyes just like her father's. The garden had changed. No longer rigid hedges, but blooming chaos, daisies, lavender, trailing vines. She paused by the steps. William stood at the doorway, watching her, the same way he had the first time, when she was half lost at the edge of a red clay road, wrapped in mist and morning light. No words were spoken, because sometimes the most beautiful things only need to be lived, especially by those who once believed they would never be chosen.